Today is Friday, July 23rd, 2021, and you are listening to the 82nd broadcast of TBR Radio Presents the TBR History Hour. My name is Dr. Edward DeVries, and for the next hour, I'll be your host, your guide here on the TBR History Hour. On today's show, what we're going to be talking about is I'm going to be sharing with you the recording of a meeting on Tuesday, July 14th. I was in Silver Spring, Maryland. Sid Secular, he's been a guest on this show in times past for many years before Sid retired. Sid was the editor of the Citizens Informer magazine. In fact, I didn't realize it until I was with him at this last meeting. Sid just turned 80 years old, and he's still active in the fight for freedom here in America. And Sid had put together a meeting in Silver Springs, just outside of the nation's capital, a meeting of patriots, and I talked about the importance of print media and the importance of publications like the Barnes Review, TBR, American Free Press, why my political activity in Dixie Heritage is as important today as it's ever been, and why we need to be focusing on print rather than internet right now. And so I'm going to share the recording with you. I'm going to let you know before we start. There were a lot of patriots in the meeting, and they were very lively. They were very interactive. It was a very participatory audience. I've left some of that back and forth with the audience in what I'm going to share with you. Some of it I edited out just because either you couldn't hear what was being said or else it would just make us go past our broadcast time. But this will give you a feel and a flavor for the meeting. But first, a commercial from our friends over at TBR Magazine, and then in 45 seconds, we'll be back with the Patriot meeting.
Browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
Back in 1993, before the internet was even a thing.
Right.
Back when getting online meant using a landline telephone to very slowly dial into a remote computer somewhere and connect to what was called a bulletin board. And the network was limited to however many phone lines the person who operated the server or the bulletin board had. And though email existed, there was quite a process of sending it from one person's server to another person's server. And because the internet, as we know it, didn't exist back then, the internet as we know it didn't really become a thing until 1995. And it really didn't become popularized, probably, or something that people even started to get onto until 1996 with a thing called CompuServe, which you've already forgotten. And America Online, which, yes, I still have an America Online email address, edward.devries@aol.com.
I do.
And, but in 1993, I started an online Bible college and seminary.
Wow.
And now
What seminary?
It's the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. It's at bibleschool.edu. We have just under 1,000 students now.
Wow.
I would say probably all but about 160 or 70 of them are in third world countries. And so that's been going now for let's see, 26 years now. And I once upon a time, back in the 1990s, I was the manager, the national manager for the RNC's National Phone Bank in Houston, Texas.
Wow. Alrighty then.
And
all right, TC.
And I was basically the person responsible for getting Bob Dole slapped with $200,000 in fines by the Federal Election Commission.
All right.
I was actually trying to get his candidacy just shut down, but in spite of the fact that had all of the evidence of God knows, just the laundry list of things. He was the anointed one. So because I had raised enough of a stink, they did slap his campaign with $200,000 of fine so that it would look like he did something. But ultimately, I got fired as the manager of the National Phone Bank of the RNC.
Because you did that?
Yeah, and
Well, no good deed goes unpunished.
so I was in my early 20s, and I was young and I was naive, and I actually thought that the political process was supposed to be
Honest.
Yeah, honest. That's a good word for it. And, but I did get a little bit of an education, and one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I don't want to get hung up on that era of my life, but just we talked a little bit about these things earlier.
That's the only copy. I have to make a copy for you.
One of the things that interested me was that they couldn't get enough Republicans
They couldn't get
to get behind Dole.
They couldn't get enough.
Right.
Okay, Pat Buchanan actually won the first 5 primaries. He won them hands down. He won them without a contest. When Pat Buchanan, after he won New Hampshire, when he said the fax machines are already buzzing, he wasn't lying.
Yeah.
And
General Knox.
Yeah. And so they couldn't get anybody to come in and volunteer to work the phones for Dole. The enthusiasm wasn't there. So they called the DNC. And the DNC sent in 150 people. And I was managing 150 Democrats volunteering at the RNC headquarters because they couldn't get Republicans to work for Dole. So for those of you who don't believe we have a uniparty, we do. For a number of years, I worked in Florida. I worked for the Florida Baptist Convention for a number of years. But anyways, long story short, I guess I was good at organizing things, but they didn't want me to have a platform. So Dixie Heritage was actually birthed out of that. Actually, it started as a thing called Southern Baptist for Southern Heritage. And then we changed the name to Dixie Heritage, and it's kind of hard for me to claim to be a Southern Baptist when I had officially,
Right.
not only was I no longer in the employ of the convention, but the church that I pastored in Florida basically withdrew from the convention at that point. They pretty much either had to, side with me or side with the convention, and they chose to side with me. And so I wasn't even pastoring a Southern Baptist church at that point. And so, but Southern Baptist for Southern Heritage became Dixie Heritage. And I'm going to put you this way. When I'm making the rounds in the Capitol building, I'm not bumping into anybody from the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm not bumping into anybody from the League of the South. I'm not bumping into anybody from the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And I ask these congressmen. Very few congressmen will actually talk to me. I usually end up talking to one of their flunkies. And I'll ask them, and they'll say, no one's come by from the Sons of Confederate Veterans. No, nobody's come by from the United Daughters of the Confederacy. No one's come by from the League of the South. No, nobody's come by from, pick your organization. So I am going to put myself out there and say that I am the largest lobbyist for Confederate monuments in the United States today. Luke 19.
Okay.
Jesus speaking to his servants. He says this. He says, "Occupy till I come." Now that word occupy does not mean to take up space. It does not mean to sit on your butt and watch Dr. Phil. Okay? John chapter 9, verse number 4, he said this. He said, "I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. For the night cometh when no man can work." And that is where we are at. The night is falling in America. How many of y'all, and I'm sure the answer is going to be everybody, how many of y'all read 1984, George Orwell, 1984, everybody?
Did finish it.
Yeah, okay.
It was long.
The role of the media in society presented in 1984. It's a commentary about the future. And Orwell made some astute observations. And basically, if you read that book, you realize that the media has an amazing amount of influence. It shapes thought. And so journalism is there's a responsibility to journalism, whether it's in print, whether it's electronic. But the journalist's job, you would think, is to inform the citizens of the facts. But the fact of the matter is that the media is by no means neutral and it's by no means factual. But if you remember in 1984, not only the use, but the misuse of the media. And so basically the media became a constant, perpetual source of propaganda. And the concerns that Orwell articulated in 1984 and again in Animal Farm and in some of his other works, they're probably more relevant today than they were when he was writing them.
Mm-hmm.
And
But he was a Fabian socialist, and he was trying to let the word out.
yeah.
This is your area, Mr. Kerr.
And we didn't know it when he was writing his books. And we didn't, I say we, as a civilization, we didn't know it when he was writing the books. And we, when we were in high school, which was probably when most of us read his books, we didn't know it. But Orwell was writing about cancel culture. We hadn't coined the phrase, but Orwell was writing about cancel culture. And one of the main concerns about the damaging psychological, sociological impact of the media, it's articulated throughout the novel. Winston Smith. The novel begins. Winston Smith. He's going to do something very subversive. He's going to write a diary. He's going to write a journal. He's been contemplating writing this diary for some time, maybe years. One of the early quotes in the book, quote, "For weeks he had been making ready for the moment," unquote. And so what does Winston do? He goes into a shop. He knows it's wrong to do so, but he does it anyways. And what does he buy? He buys a pen and he buys some ink, which are contraband. But he's doing it out of an urgency because he has something important that he has to record. I don't know if it's for himself, if it's for posterity. And so 1984, if you remember, the book was written in a narrative format. So the book has a narrator. And the narrator is telling us that Winston plans this diary and he, quote, hoped to transfer to paper the interminable, restless monologue that had been running inside his head for years, unquote. But something happens. He touches the pen to the paper and he seizes up with anxiety. And he realizes in that moment that he had thought more about writing, how he's not supposed to do it. Going to an illegal store to buy contraband, pen and paper. He thought more about those things than he actually thought about what he was actually going to write when he began to write. And so the narrator tells us that Winston, quote, seemed not merely to have lost the power of expressing himself, but even to have forgotten what it was that he had originally thought, unquote. And so the sense of Winston's capacity for critical thinking and self-expression had been robbed from him. And now he finally has the chance to translate his thoughts onto the page. But he's not written in so long that he doesn't even know what to say. And then when he does attempt to write something, he says, quote, his handwriting is childish, unquote, and, quote, straggling up and down the page, unquote. Because no one in Oceania had written for years. All of the information that they took in, or should I say all of the propaganda, came from a screen. And so Winston takes his pen in hand and he finally begins to write. Finally, the thoughts begin to come and the writing begins to flow. And, quote, capital letters and finally even full stops, unquote. In other words, he abandoned them. No punctuation, no capitalizing sentences, no grammar, no paragraph breaks, just word after word after word after word after word. And then he begins writing about the most mundane things. He begins describing going to the movies the night before, and then he describes the movie and the significance of the movie and his reaction to the movie. And then he writes, quote, I don't suppose anyone happened, or quote, I don't suppose anything happened, unquote, quote, I don't suppose anyone cares, unquote. In other words, he's at least getting his capacity for expression back, which had eluded him. And so Orwell's novel we thought it was allegorical. We were taught that it was allegorical. But it really is a accurate description of our own world. For example, what did Winston Smith do? He worked for the Ministry of Propaganda. He talked about newspeak and how they changed the language. And so they changed the language so that words don't mean what you would think that they would mean, so that you would read the words and come to a conclusion that's different from what the words should mean if you were to look them up in a dictionary, say. But look back to September 11th. There was a terrorist attack on that day, September 11th, 2001. At least that's what the media told us. Was there a terrorist attack that day? Maybe there was. Maybe it was an inside job. Maybe it was a false flag. Maybe our own government toppled 2 skyscrapers. Maybe Hitler burned the Reichstag. We don't want to entertain those possibilities. You say, well, why not? Because it's easier to dismiss it as a terrorist attack. It's easier to just brand anybody who would dare to question the official narrative as a conspiracy theorist and go on. Why? Because investigation and discussion are verboten. And so look at the media coverage, though, since September 11th. The facts and the information become distorted very quickly, because the media outlets use neutral-sounding words that are not at all neutral, and they insert descriptors. And so it's by no means value-free or judgment-free narrative or conversation or reporting. For example, look at the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Look at the way the United States media treats pretty much anything that happens in the Middle East. Look at all the euphemisms that get stuck in the news reporting. Misleading descriptors that change the way people believe about these things. For example, areas where Palestinians live are called disputed territories. Jewish settlements in Palestinian areas are just called neighborhoods. Arab militants are called terrorists. But Israelis, maybe they're called fanatics, but they're usually just called civilians. Israelis killed by Palestinians, or even by their own Israeli defense forces, are said to have been murdered by radical extremists. And we assume those radical extremists are the Palestinians. But the Palestinians killed by Israeli soldiers, they were just collateral damage or caught in the crossfire. But it's not just there. The same thing happens in coverage of other countries and other continents. It happens in our own domestic news. People who come to support keeping a monument are referred to as radicals and terrorists and protesters and violent. And the people who actually came to violently rip the statue off of its pedestal are the peaceful protesters. I mean,
Of course.
and so instead of reporting the facts and just, let people make up their mind, the media is very creative with words, and they can shape opinion. And like Winston Smith, those Americans who question the facts or who deviate from the official interpretation or who deviate from the official opinion, they're suspect. And so Orwell's novel, it was an exercise in futuristic imagination, maybe. Or like you said, maybe it was a warning against the government.
1948 is when he...
But just as Winston began the book, and he couldn't express himself, he didn't know what to put on the paper, he didn't know what to write. He'd gone to such great lengths to get paper and pen so that he could write, but he didn't know what to say, he didn't know what to write. Why? Because he had been robbed of his ability to have any type of authentic self-expression. So how did that happen? His whole life had been manipulated by his government from cradle to where he was. And the same thing is true today with our educational system, with our media. And so the reader who pays attention to current events and current media strategies realizes that the world that Orwell envisioned, it's the world we're living in. And what was Winston Smith's job? I said he worked for the Ministry of Propaganda. Every day he edited the archives. In other words, he would delete, he would revise, he would rewrite the old news reports, the statistics from the previous years. So if the glorious leader accidentally got up and said that the wrong team won the World Series 8 years ago, he would go back and change the record so that the team that the glorious leader said won the World Series. Or maybe the government wanted to say we've had the biggest corn crop in history. And, you know, there were 57 other years in the past that had bigger corn crops. Well, not anymore. That was Winston Smith's job. And so whatever needed to be added, subtracted, changed, revised, rewritten, that's what he did. So that the government narrative would always be the truth. And the government's narrative would always be the only truth that ever existed, because any evidence of any previous truth would have been eliminated. Think of it as Wikipedia. Every day it gets changed, edited, and revised.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it as YouTube. YouTube videos that challenge the official narrative just simply get deleted. Google, biggest search engine in the world, constantly changing the facts. Wikipedia can change the entire article of Robert E. Lee or Thomas Jefferson. They could rewrite the very Constitution itself, and nobody would be wiser, except for that bloody Encyclopedia Britannica. There are millions of those boogers all over the world.
Amen.
And anyone who has one can open it up.
Hang on to it.
Yep.
Thank you.
And so what's my point? My point is electronic documents can be manipulated, but books, magazines, Winston Smith could change the archive copy of every book, of every magazine, of every newspaper, of every government report, at least the ones that were in his archive. But what about the hundreds of millions of copies in print all around Oceania? Oh, I forgot, they didn't have any print publications in Oceania. You know, I've had my website taken down. Dixie Heritage has been taken down, and it was quite a task to get it rehosted.
Who did it?
Actually, it was the service provider.
They did it to mine. Who
Yeah.
are you using?
Who were you using? GoDaddy? Or
I was using GoDaddy. Mine went down after
Yeah.
$2,500, and I
Yeah.
almost.
did
Well,
you get it back?
I called the chairman of the board,
Did you get your
Mr. Warren.
I
himself.
did. I had to find a new provider. I found a provider in Canada, a company called
You
OSM.
see? Yeah, and I never knew that was
Yeah.
happening to me. Yeah, they
And
just wanna know that.
I don't know how many times I gave up on MailChimp years ago, because MailChimp would just keep deleting my emails. And right now I'm using Constant Contact, and to be brutally honest, sometimes I wonder if they don't even conveniently arrange for a large percentage of them to just get lost in cyberspace.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why we're coming up with alternatives.
Well,
to
that's
each of
why
these
I'm here.
platforms.
I'm
There
here
needs to
because
be,
one of you
like
in here
Christian
have that
patriots.
answer.
Yeah.
One in here has that answer.
Now I'll be brutally honest, okay?
But
Printing books
yes, sir.
It's dangerous too.
is difficult. It's dangerous.
It's
but
difficult.
It's difficult.
No, I've
difficult.
tried.
And it's expensive.
Yes.
And what I can do is I can just give these books to Amazon.
Right.
And
And
Amazon
they'll edit your books for you too.
and Amazon will print them in an electronic format, and people will buy them, and Amazon will send me a check every month. And that's a whole lot easier. Until one day somebody at Amazon doesn't like something that you've written,
Right.
and then it's all over.
Then they change it.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that.
Yeah. We talked about the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review has had its websites attacked. The Barnes Review, I don't know how many times, has had its websites taken down. The Barnes Review, for example, has lost its ability to process credit cards. The banks just decide that they're just not going to. They just figure if they don't give you the ability to accept credit cards, you'll go out of business. That we've somehow managed to stay in business for all these years. But it's difficult to have to limit yourself to cash and checks, especially when you're dealing with the mail.
How come they're still taking credit cards from me? Gone through you.
Okay, American Free Press
Yeah.
has a credit card processing
a merchant account that it was able to procure from a company who specializes in helping people who have that kind of a problem. But here's the catch: where a regular credit card company charges you anywhere from 1% to 3%, maybe 4 or 5% if it's American Express, they're paying like 18, 19% in
Wow.
transaction fees. Yeah, so 18, 19% of what you're paying is actually going to the, I don't want to call them a loan shark, but I don't know what to call
Even
them.
for debit cards?
Yep.
Even for debit cards?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because the
that's-
banks won't process, because they can't get an account with a bank to process the
Why
cards.
hasn't,
And so there's a third party who basically, for a fee will help people who have a problem. Kind of like, Ronald Reagan said, the 9 most dangerous words in the English language are I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yes.
Or kind of like if you'll be Don Corleone's friend, he will help you. Believe me, I could reach far more people for a lot less money electronically than I can on the printed page. But print is more important than ever. And why? Because the electronic media can be manipulated. Or it can just be deleted. And so that's why the Barnes Review is so important. That's why American Free Press is so important. That's why the Citizens Informer is so important. That's why I wish the editor of the Citizens Informer would quit wasting his paper and his ink on the things that he writes and actually write something of substance.
Right. Agree with that.
But this guy here, when I lived in Florida, he was half an hour away from me for years, and I get this in the mail every month. The Sovereign, and Sid can tell you how to subscribe to that. You should be reading publications, supporting publications, and more importantly, sharing them. In other words, okay, so you get the Barnes Review in the mail, and you read it, and then you shove it. We should share it. American Free Press, we should share it. We buy a book, we read it, we put it on the shelf. We should share it. Kind of getting out of order here. But last week, and he's a great guy, his name's Jody Musgrove, Australian guy. You've probably never heard of him. But he has a YouTube channel with just under 200,000 subscribers. He makes $120,000 a year in ad revenue.
Wow.
From his YouTube channel. It's how he supports himself, his wife, his children. It's how he's paying his way through the university. And I'm going to guess he should be making more than $120,000, and I'll tell you why. Last week, my radio show had 2 of my radio shows. TBR Radio presents the TBR History Hour, and TBR Radio presents the Dixie Heritage Show. Both of those last week showed over 2,000 views on YouTube. Then I looked at it a couple hours later. They showed 12.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
do
I
that.
was losing my mind.
Yeah. Then the next day, it showed 15. Then before I went to bed that night, it showed 12. Why do they keep bringing it down to 12?
Yeah, please tell me.
Because they don't want to pay the monetization for the advertisements.
Horse of a different color.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So they take away your viewers. So if they do that to me, on my little shows, what do they do to a guy like Jody? I mean, I've only got 1,500 and some subscribers to my YouTube channel. Jody has 200,000. I mean, my videos show a couple thousand views, then they go down to 12. Jody's videos show tens of thousands of views, sometimes hundreds of thousands of views. So if they take him from 150,000 views down to 110,000 views, would he even notice it? Especially when he's got 600 and some videos and he puts up 3 a week.
So when I had 27,000 followers on Twitter, and Trump had 2.7 million, and mine went down from 27 to you're right, 127, period, 127. I thought, what the heck? I guess they really didn't want me to be president, you think?
Yeah. And there's another reason to drop that number, besides just they don't want to pay the advertising revenue.
Is that right?
Think of Google and YouTube and even Amazon. Think of it as a big search engine. And there's algorithms that run the search engines. And one of the things that drives the algorithm is popularity. And so if other people are viewing your videos, they're more popular. And so the algorithm is going to push them up higher in the search engine results so that more people will see them, or maybe your video would be suggested to other people. As you got this on the side there, it suggests the next videos you should watch. Well, if thousands of people are watching, then you get into that algorithm. But if only 12 people watched your video, you're not in the algorithm.
Right.
And so they're not, in this case, they're not deleting my content, they're just burying it. You know, Rumble actually pays out its monetization. And I'll tell you how much money I make on Rumble. About $2.15 a week.
What do you do with it?
What, the $2.15 or the
That's a
or
good
Rumble?
question. Yeah.
Celebrate, maybe.
I think you're going back to
But
the writing.
but the reason I brought up Jody, okay, Jody's channel, he talks about watches. It's called Horology. You know, like watch, you wear it on your wrist, Horology. Horology is the study of watches and timekeeping. I have a podcast, comes out once a month, called the Poor Boys Horology Podcast. Now, Jody puts out a video 3 a week. He'll have, if he puts out a bad video, 60,000 people watch it. That's a bad video for Jody. A good video for me, 4,000 people watch it. A bad video, you know, maybe 600 people watch it. But then again, I don't know, because, you know, YouTube's constantly playing with the numbers, so I don't really know how many people watch them. But as a horologist, Jody's the guy I want to grow up to be, okay? I want to be the guy who, you know, can make $120,000 a year talking about wristwatches on YouTube, and, you know, that's the guy I want to be. He really is a great guy. He has never said anything in the 5 years that I've been watching his podcasts. He's never said anything political. He's never said anything the slightest bit racial. He's never said anything controversial. I don't know. I guess maybe the fact that he thought that Sean Connery was a better Bond than, you know, Roger Moore, maybe that would be controversial to some people. But I mean, he never goes into the things that are, you know, really truthfully controversial.
Religion or politics.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what happened last week? YouTube deleted his channel.
No way.
Yep.
No way.
Do you want to know why?
Yeah,
Why?
please.
Don't have a clue. Because they could.
Well, look at all these scholars in here. What do we do about that?
Yeah.
I don't want to go into my beautiful living room on the
Trump
lake
is
and
suing
sit
him,
there.
babe.
Oh,
Yeah.
Suing him.
please,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Let me sue him.
Yeah. But
Let
Jody,
me really
yeah.
sue him. Let me
Yeah.
really. You know why? Because Trump was told he had no standing to. Yeah, don't let me take that from you. Go right ahead.
No,
We'll
but
get back to that.
you know,
We'll
YouTube
get
pulled
back to it. We'll get back.
YouTube pulled 2 of my watch podcasts. YouTube pulled 2 of my watch
Oh,
podcasts.
Gosh, I'm sorry, Pastor.
Were you on daylight savings time? Maybe that was.
The reason YouTube pulled one of my watch podcasts
Or
was because I told a joke about Joe Biden.
oh no,
I kid
this
you not.
isn't good.
I kid you not. But Jody's never wore Biden. He's never even mentioned Joe Biden. He's never wore a Trump hat. You know, never questioned the election results. But and you know what's funny, because I did another video that got pulled, and I was comparing the watch collections of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And actually, Biden has a lot cooler watch collection than Trump does. I mean, Biden has, you know, how do I say this? Trump's watch collection is a few very predictable, very sterile Rolexes. Okay, you know, Biden's watch collection, at least it has some character. There was something to talk about.
I was wearing
You know?
a Timex this morning.
Yeah, and there was some you know, there was some variation to it. You know, he had some really nice pieces, and that, don't get me wrong, I would love to have Donald Trump's watches, but Biden's watches are just more. But I guess I had said something in the course of that video that might have insinuated that potentially that, you know, the person who was declared the winner of that election, you know, I think I might have said something to the effect of that, you know, that when it comes to the watch collection, you know, Biden's the winner. When it came to the election, Trump was the winner. You know, I think I might have said something.
Truth. True.
Yes, but anyways,
Yeah, true.
verboten on YouTube. But Jody's not a radical, Trump supporting conservative. He's just an Australian guy who, But you know that the Barnes Review and the American Free Press can't even get monetization. Not that the videos don't earn it. Not that my radio show doesn't earn monetization, but YouTube refuses to write us the checks. They just refuse to pay out to people who they don't support, who they don't agree with. I guess people have said, well, why don't you sue them? Yeah, I could. I could hire a lawyer. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
I know, prostitutes,
Yeah.
whores, and
Yeah.
Because the court system is corrupt too.
Yeah.
that's right, all the way up to why is he having trouble in that court case? Because Judge Gibney and Judge Locke are both Barack Obama appointees. Thank you very much. And that's why he's sitting there waiting while they delay it. So I can't wait for your solutions. Sir.
And so, so I've taken all the Dixie Heritage content. I've taken all my preaching content from church. I've moved it to Daily Motion and Rumble. And let me go ahead and say it. Daily Motion's even taken down some of my videos.
Oh no.
I've talked to Andrew Torba over at Gab. I need to talk with him more. And the truth is that Gab is great. They don't censor stuff. But it's like all of the powers that be in the internet and in the world are like converging against them, trying to shut them down. They were basically able to shut down Parler. They neutralized MeWe, and now they're going for Gab. And the only reason that they haven't been able to get Gab is because Andrew Torba runs his own servers out of his little barn in Pennsylvania.
Really?
And so about the only way they're going to take him down is, as if the Air Force, flies over and, drops an air-to-surface missile at his barn.
Uh-oh.
That might take him out, but be a little obvious. But
He could be suicidal.
yeah.
Gosh, I don't know if there's any hope in here.
But
Is it Jesus Christ? They're censoring him?
I have.
Okay, I have hope too. That's the last thing we got in Hebrews. And I love my
If you
Old
get your
Testament.
points in, it's not so bad being
Yeah.
suicidal.
No. Don't do it.
So I'll give you another illustration. Facebook. They just stopped sending our Dixie Heritage subscribers notices when we would post new content. So our reach went from thousands of posts to dozens of posts. They call it shadow banning. They don't delete you. They don't outright ban you. They just make sure nobody sees your stuff. And so my reach went from 12,000 a week before the shadow ban to a couple of hundred a week after the shadow ban.
There's my, what a waste. I wasted all that time.
Yahoo,
Social
Gmail, America Online, they'll just put emails that they don't want you to read in your spam folder. And I don't know how many times I've deleted my spam folder. I don't know how many times I've set my settings so that I wouldn't have a spam folder, so that I would get everything. And it's still.
Right.
So imagine what our reach would be if the internet were not against us at every level. But what it goes to show is that our radio shows, our videos could be gone tomorrow.
Holy mackerel, guys.
Okay? Maybe you heard this. I don't know. Sid heard this. A few weeks ago, an elected official in Texas appeared on my radio shows. And then Media Matters crucified him for appearing on a, quote, neo-Nazi, neo-Confederate, Holocaust-denying, Hitler-loving venue.
Who was the guest?
But I'll tell you, okay, back in the late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
The church that I pastored in Texas, we had a ministry. Basically, families that were at fear of having their children taken from them could come and find political asylum in our church.
Wow.
And,
That's amazing.
You're more important than I thought you were.
And so we had actually come up with a vast amount of documentation. And Dr. Aubrey Vaughn helped us put this together. And Aubrey Vaughn was actually George H.W. Bush's, not George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. H.W. was the father. He was George W., the son's campaign manager the first time he ran for governor of Texas.
Yeah.
And pastors Grace Baptist Church in Houston, Texas. And he had helped to put this information together. And basically we had established that the Child Protective Services in Texas was basically taking children and selling them
Of
and
course.
making millions of dollars.
Of course.
And of course, they were doing that under the guise of legal adoption, but the people at the head of that agency were lawyers, and they were gaming the system, and they were lining their pockets with millions of dollars a year. And all of this was given to the Houston Chronicle, who, rather than running the story, just destroyed the evidence.
Of course.
Well, it took 20 years to put the evidence back together. And he had the legislation going through the Texas legislature that was presumably going to make them accountable for all of this. And it was going to change all the rules under which that agency operated. And then he gets called out for appearing on a neo-Nazi, neo-Confederate, Holocaust-denying, Hitler-loving venue. And he cut a deal. And his legislation did pass. And he'll get credit for that. But essentially what the legislation that passed will do is codify all the things that he was attempting to reform. He'll never pass any meaningful legislation ever again in the rest of his career, but he will get to get reelected. Anyways, his press agent denied that he was ever on our show.
Yes. Yes.
His press agent denied he was ever on our show, and then Media Matters actually accused us of splicing together thousands of clips of him on other shows to make it sound like he was saying things that he never said. Because I have nothing better to do between lobbying for Confederate monuments and pastoring a church and going around on the speaking circuit and, being the president of a college and writing books and the other things that I do, coaching baseball and all of the other things that I do. I just have time on my hands. So I have hundreds of man hours that I can put in to splicing together thousands of little snippets of this politician from hundreds of other interviews to make it sound like he said things that he didn't say. Because I have time to do that. Because anybody at TBR has time to do that. But those interviews, when that Media Matters story broke, were offline faster than you could say Rumpelstiltskin. Now, 8 hours later, Media Matters retracted the story. Media Matters, they get caught in lies all the time. They very rarely retract. You say, well, why did they retract this one? Because it was just that big of a lie and they couldn't substantiate it. But print. The Inquisition tried to burn books. The Nazis tried to burn books. The Soviets tried to burn books. The Americans have tried to burn books.
They're changing them right now.
They didn't try. They've
Betsy
done it
DeVos.
many times.
The English burned Wycliffe and Tyndale at the stake, and guess what? Bible's still here.
Praise God. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jewish Jehovah.
Ahaya, Asher, Ahaya.
Okay.
All the Jews in the room know what I just said. You know what I said, Sid.
I think I do.
No.
Well, then
No.
share it for those that don't.
No, but when Moses was in the burning bush,
I'm not sure.
and he said, "Okay, God, okay, you're God, okay, you're God, okay, so I'm going to go to Pharaoh, and he's going to ask me, okay, so what was your God's name? What am I supposed to tell him?" God answered. He said, "Ahaya, Asher, Ahaya." That's Hebrew for I am that I am.
Oh.
Okay.
Is that Aramaic or Hebrew?
That's Hebrew. Yeah.
And Asher.
That's
Was
how we
one
know
of the
God's
tribes.
white, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're black, he said, I is who he is.
That's how we know that Popeye is such a godly man. I am that I am.
Do
That's
it
all that I
again.
am.
TC, do it again. What'd you just say?
So that's how we know God's white. Because if you're black, he said, I is that I is.
Okay, I shouldn't do this. Where's the pen?
Okay.
Where's the pen?
Okay. That's it. The pen is all
And this is why Media Matters calls my radio show the names that it does.
you got it.
Yeah, I need.
And on the table in the kitchen, there's.
Oh, here's one. It's right here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
The
good.
pen is stronger than the sword. The pen is
Mightier than the sword.
mightier than the sword. Yeah.
Okay, I am going to. I have written down something here for Sid. He needs contact information.
Okay.
I want you to read that for me.
P54 455 feet.
That's Jesse Jackson's phone number.
That's what?
Jesse Jackson's phone number. Jesse Jackson's phone number. Maybe it's Al Sharpton's phone number. I don't know.
Yeah, that's too smart for them.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a list of books that have been banned in the United States and England. It's not the complete list.
Of course not.
These are just the ones that I know you're going to recognize when I rattle them off. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
No, no.
The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck.
Oh no.
Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck.
Oh Lord.
To Kill a Mockingbird by
Oh,
Harper
no,
Lee.
no. That was a
What
great
is this
record.
list that you have here?
These are books that have been banned in the United States and England.
Sorry.
The Color Purple by James Joyce, or by Alice Walker. Ulysses by James Joyce. This is one of my all-time favorite books. The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. 1984 by George Orwell.
What?
No way.
Animal Farm by George Orwell. I made a mistake. I was actually interviewing for a job as a teacher in a private school. A supposedly conservative and Christian private school. And they wanted to know what books I would require my high school students to read. And I made the mistake of rattling off too many books that are on this list. Like The Lord of the Flies in 1984. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Everybody should have to read that book. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway was probably the most iconic writer in America.
Absolutely.
The Old Man and the Sea. I mean, that's just classic
Yes.
stuff. When I go to Cuba, my Cuban friends get bored because all I want to do is go around and go to all of Hemingway's old haunts. But For Whom the Bell Tolls, another Hemingway classic. For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1940, the United States Postal Service declared it non-mailable. Did you know the Barnes Review has been declared non-mailable by the Canadian Postal Service? Yeah. We have thousands.
Canadian Postal?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have thousands of Canadian subscribers. But we have to smuggle the magazines across the border for them to get them. Is I Lie Dying by William Faulkner. The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell.
No way. No, my mother's rolling over in her grave right now.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken.
Oh, no.
You know, that movie
My
made
father's
Jack
fault.
Nicholson's career. Remember Jack?
Yes,
Yeah.
A Few Good Men.
You want the truth?
What's the
Yeah.
common
You can't
thread?
handle that truth.
What was that?
Yeah.
What's the
I'm
common
going to
thread
pass
on,
some of this.
on
Who's hungry so I can just give
outlawing
you
them and
a
how could they
treat?
outlaw printing?
I don't know.
hungry.
These
I know.
crackers.
I
are
don't
so
know
good.
what the common thread is.
Are they like ginger and sunflower?
Some of the content implies some racial meaning.
Yeah. They're just not politically correct.
Oh my
The Call of the Wild,
Can I
I
try
thought it
that?
was. Yeah, for sure.
This-
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jay.
Truman
Oh,
Capote's
Tolkien.
books. Truman Capote was LGBT and Q,
Uh-huh.
and his books have been banned. Sophie's Choice by William Styron, which was a book about a Holocaust survivor. So nothing's sacred, okay?
I'm surprised about the Lord of the Rings though, because that's so popular.
So you say, well, why again? Why did I choose these books? Because you know them. Because they're that common. Some of you didn't even know that these books have been banned. Why?
No.
Because they're that common.
Eileen.
Amazon, eBay, the government, the Department of Education, the media, Hollywood, they just can't make these books go away. By the way, Mein Kampf's still with us. So's the Bible.
I
Okay.
had it, but I gave it to somebody.
Yeah.
Why?
You know what? You can tear down Jefferson statues, and they're doing it. But the Declaration of Independence is still screaming, and you want to know why? Because Jefferson wrote it down. Jefferson wrote it down, and millions of copies are out there. And so print is important. Subscribe to print publications. Buy printed books.
Yeah, I have that.
Buy my printed books, because if not, then I won't have gas money to get home, and Sid will be stuck with me. Subscribe to the American Free Press. Subscribe to the Barnes Review. Read them. Share them.
Ready? Ready?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass it across.
It would be nice if you wrote some of what you just have given us
There you go.
as an article in the Barnes Review.
I may.
Just pass it
I
on
may.
when you're ready.
And
Because I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware.
but there's a reason. A couple of years ago, Sid asked me to drive. At that time, I lived in Florida, and I drove up here.
Wow.
And the reason I did it, 19 hours, was because groups like this are important. Meetings like this are important. The Constitution Party, the American Freedom Party, they're important. They're more important now than they've ever been.
Constitution Party USA.
Which is different from the.
Absolutely, because you're not going to put a murderer in there that's going to go and muddy up the water and go from there.
Or a Mormon ambulance chaser, but that's a whole other.
I'm telling you right now.
But Dixie Heritage is more important now than it's ever been. Last week, I was in Delaware. Now, for 5 years, I pastored in the Villages, Florida, world's largest retirement community.
Wow.
But I was in Delaware last week, and they've got retirement communities in Delaware that make the Villages, Florida look chump.
Really?
I mean, the golf courses in Delaware, I mean, it's right across the Chesapeake Bay.
That's the infrastructure Biden's talking about.
I mean, Sid, why are you living here in the swamp when you could be playing golf in Delaware where there are no taxes?
Well, I have a reverse mortgage, so I'm kind of stuck. That's the truth of it.
But why does he do it, though? Why does he do it? Because it's important. Because it's important.
Yep.
I'll give you one more
I
illustration
don't
to
want
this.
to downsize. I got all this great. I got, I don't know, a couple of thousand books scattered everywhere. My whole basement is loaded with books. I don't have bookcases to put them in, but you know,
Mine
I'm
was,
still accumulating them.
fireman arrived at my house and said, "Who read all these books?" I said, "See." Go ahead.
But I'll give you one more illustration, one more little story, and then I'll be done. Tomorrow, and it's the reason I scheduled, because Sid's been trying to get me over here for a while now, and the reason I asked to do it tonight is because tomorrow I've got to go to Baltimore and I've got to pick up my dear friend.
Really?
He lives in Havana. It's his first time in the United States. Mentioned at the beginning how Winston Smith, when he bought pen and ink, he was committing a criminal act.
Yeah.
His government feared putting anything in print. Every time I've been to Cuba, he's been my host. I've stayed with him. This will be my first opportunity to have him in my home. But he's a graphic artist by trade, and he lays out and prints and distributes comic books. And his father and his father-in-law realized decades ago that when the communists took over the island, they did it by giving comic books to kids.
Wow.
And so to bring the youth into the freedom movement in Cuba, his father and his father-in-law, the man who's now his father-in-law, had started comic books. And as the internet's grown in Cuba, they use it. But people's access to the internet is limited. It's monitored, as it is becoming in our country, although we don't realize it. And so the printed page is still important. And so on my first trip to Cuba years ago, I brought computers, I brought printers, I brought paper. Do you want to know what the Cuban officials wanted to confiscate?
Your comic books.
Not the computers, but the printers and the paper.
Wow.
Because they fear the printed page.
Wow.
On each trip, when I go to Cuba now, years later, I bring hundreds of iPads, smartphones, tablets, laptops. They all sell right through customs. So I bring in iPads, I bring in iPhones, I bring in tablets, I bring in laptops to give to these Cuban pastors, to give to the students in our Cuban Bible College. And they go right through customs. Not a problem. But do you want to know what the customs agents still want to confiscate? What I got to pay the bribes to get into the country?
The books.
Books. Yeah, paper and printers and ink.
Wow.
Paper, ink, and printers. I can bring stacks of DVDs with 20,000 books apiece on them.
Wow.
I can bring suitcases full of thumb drives, full of books. And the customs guy just shrugs his shoulder. One book in my briefcase. Maybe it's a Bible, whatever. And it's like, I got to shell out a few bucks to get it in. They fear the printed page. You know, I've got all the equipment.
Okay.
I've got all the equipment. And I could run a radio station. And I could program it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I could broadcast it. All the equipment fits in my attic. 30-foot pole on the side of my house. Transmitting tower. I could hit the entire eastern shore of Maryland and half of Delaware.
And you don't want?
And you say, well, why don't you do it?
Yeah.
Because the FCC would fine me $10,000 a day every day that I tried.
Wow.
In other words, you've got to have elaborate licenses just to get on the radio.
Right.
Or to broadcast and be on television. You know, you could put stuff on the internet, but then they can take it down. But the printed page, the government just hasn't quite figured out what to do with the printed page.
What about the Mandela effect? You heard of the Mandela
You
effect?
believe that, Elliot?
No.
Oh, just to do a search on that.
And so, and again, what did Jesus say? Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name? It's powerful. And so I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man.
If you're like me and you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information, you like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States, the things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative, independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money-controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Well, we are out of time for today's TBR Radio Presents, the TBR History Hour, but go to our website, www.barnesreview.org, www.barnesreview.org, and find out how you can subscribe to that very important publication that I've been talking about in the speech that I gave, the presentation that I gave at the Patriot meeting in Silver Spring, Maryland, back on July 12. I hope, by the way, you've enjoyed listening to that recording. Hopefully there was something in there that was thought-provoking to you. Anyways, we do have to go, but visit www.barnesreview.org, and then tune in again next week, same time, same place. We will have another great show for you. Until then, from all of us here at TBR Radio, God bless. And I'll talk to you again next week.